Hi everyone, welcome to our live stream. Today we are going to talk about how a disruptive technology called blockchain can enhance the livelihoods of smallholder farmers. My name is Untitled Chapter. I am your host for today and a strategic consultant with Schuttelaar & Partners, the agency for a healthy world. Together with my colleagues in our Wageningen office, I am working to make international supply chains such as soy, palm oil, coffee, or indeed rice, more sustainable. Today, we are focusing on a specific initiative called BlocRice. The BlocRice project actually already started in 2018 to see if blockchain technology can be applied to international value chains. The good news, it can. My colleague Joost will fill you in on the details a bit later on. The pilot phase was supported by the Oxfam Innovation Fund. By the end of 2019, the partners decided to upscale the project by involving more farmers and making a direct link with consumers to the BlocRice application. Our objective is to ensure that the smallholder farmers growing our rice can reach a living income in the future. This requires research and validation with local stakeholders. Rogier Verschoor, private sector advisor with Oxfam, will update you on our findings and explain our living income strategy. The project is supported by the Fund for Responsible Business Conduct from RVO. Before handing over to Rogier, I would like to share a video from our local partner Adik to contextualize the findings from Oxfam.
កសិករដែលយើងបានសម្ភាសនៅក្នុងឃុំគូលែនហើយនិងឃុំភ្នំពេជ្ររស់នៅក្នុងតំបន់ដាច់ស្រយាលពីព្រោះដោយសាររឿងហ្នឹងហើយទើបធ្វើឲ្យគាត់នឹងពុំអាចទទួលបានព័ត៌មានឬក៏បច្ចេកវិទ្យាថ្មីហេតុនេះហើយទើបគាត់មិនអាចធ្វើការផ្លាស់ប្ដូររបៀបឬក៏ទម្លាប់នៃការធ្វើស្រែរបស់ពួកគាត់នោះទេកម្រិតចំណូលរបស់ពួកគាត់មានកម្រិតទាបដូច្នេះពួកគាត់មិនអាចយកចំណូលទាំងនេះទៅផ្គត់ផ្គង់គ្រួសាររបស់ពួកគាត់គ្រប់គ្រាន់នៅឡើយទេ
Welcome back. Please note that throughout our live stream you can answer any questions you may have in the chat box. We will answer these during our Q&A session towards the end of our live stream. In case you have any disconnection, please stay on the line. We'll solve your technical issues as quickly as possible. Now over to Rogier.
Yeah, the BlocRice project deals with a relatively straightforward international supply chain, practically without intermediaries. I mean, small-scale rice farmers in Preavia province in Cambodia produce paddy. These farmers are organized in agricultural cooperatives at the commune level. Almost half of these farmers are women, female farmers. Through their cooperatives, they sell paddy to Rice, the main trader and exporter from Cambodia. Then Rice pre-processes the rice, sells and ships it to Rice in the Netherlands. Rice makes nice rice cakes, sometimes with a topping, and sells it to retailers throughout Europe. Farmers also produce jasmine rice, and that's sold through Rice to, for example, Do It, and you can find it on the shelves of Eco Plaza in the Netherlands. Now, this chain has been functioning well and has improved over the past few years. It has improved, for example, by the farmers getting organized and by the cooperatives getting organic certification, because the organic certification implies a meaningful premium payment to the farmers. Now, of course, there are also issues to be worked on. Over the past months, we analyzed this chain and we found some salient risks, human rights risks. We found that farmers do not reach a living income from producing and selling their rice. We also found that the supply chain data are not transparently shared throughout the chain. Particularly the farmers, they lack access to information to improve their production and improve their lives. These issues have adverse impacts. Many farmers appear to go round and round in vicious circles of poverty, without being able to improve their lives, without being able to reach a decent living. There are also implications to other chain partners. Right, Timon?
Indeed, as explained by Rogier, there are many issues facing smallholder farmers. For companies and retailers, it is essential to identify, address, and mitigate human rights impacts in their supply chain. In order to do so, companies need to ensure that these risks are constantly being monitored and any issues are proactively addressed by working together with supply chain partners and the affected local communities. Now, in our experience, blockchain technology precisely enables that. The real-time interaction between supply chain partners, or in other words, taking care of business not only for yourself, but also for the smallholders growing your food. To explain more about blockchain technology, I'm handing over to my colleague Joost, running the digital team at Schuttelaar and Partners.
Hi, Timon. Thank you. So, thank you all for being here. And I would actually like to start with a very short lecture. Because for those of you who feel that a blockchain is a bit mysterious, after the next 60 seconds you can tell everyone, I know blockchain. So, blockchain is amazing, it will change the world, but what is it actually? I've put it all on one slide, just so you know blockchain. So, in the basic things, blockchain is a system for storing information. So, it's like a database or a huge Excel file, right? Well, yes, it mostly is, but it's a special database. It's a shared database without a central authority, or gatekeeper or director of all data. And this is what that looks like. On the left, stage left, all data flows through a central point, whereas on the right, actors or nodes, they store their own data. So, what is the most well-known blockchain or most notorious? Well, that is of course Bitcoin. And so if we know that blockchain is just a system for storing information, what kind of information do we actually store in Bitcoin? Well, it is nothing more than A sends X amount of Bitcoin to B. Now A has Y Bitcoin and B has Z Bitcoin. So that's the only information that is being stored in Bitcoin. So what is so special about blockchain? Well, it prevents A to spend a Bitcoin twice without needing this central authority who keeps the books like a bank. But how do all the participants know what is true? Well, this is done using a so-called consensus algorithm, the consensus of which transactions are recorded in this shared database. When people talk about mining bitcoins, this is actually the energy being wasted on reaching consensus. By the way, there are many different consensus algorithms, so mining is not necessary for all types of blockchains. So with this nice set of slides, or actually one slide, you know the basics of blockchain. So there is no magic involved, and you can remember that. So blockchain in the end does nothing more than registering data in a very, very complicated way compared to a database. So when somebody tells you blockchain makes it easy to ... share, connect or integrate IT systems, it is probably not true. Blockchain makes it much harder to exchange information. However, what blockchain does, it makes it possible to share data between many different actors, in our case food companies, without that central gatekeeper who controls all the data, like the government or a big company like Amazon. It makes it possible for a smallholder farmer in Cambodia to own their own data, and with that have a better chance at a living income. Which is a very nice bridge to Roger, who will tell us about how we measured what a living income actually is. Roger?
Now, what is a living income actually? A living income is the yearly income in cash and in kind that you need to have a decent life with your family members. Of course, a living income is an average for a certain group of people in a certain place. Having a decent life comprises having enough money to buy food for a model diet that is based on the calorie intake established by WHO. Decent housing with shelter, basic services, some separate rooms. Enough income also to pay for essential needs like going to the doctors, going to school, paying for transport. Having sufficient income to also make some financial reservation for any unexpected event. And that's quite prevalent in Preaviar province. Droughts, floods. Now, for rice farmers in Kulen and Phnom Penh commune, we established the income that they need to have a decent life, their living income benchmark. And that living income benchmark was approximately 4,500 euro. Subsequently, we compared that living income benchmark with their actual income. And we found that there is a gap, a considerable gap, the living income gap. In our analysis, we found that that living income gap is 31%. This means that these farmers have an income of 69% of their living income. So they fall 31% short. The difference between male and female farmers in this respect was found insignificant. This is consistent with the finding that farmers go round and round in vicious circles of poverty. Having established the living income benchmark, the living income gap, the project partners established a strategy to close that gap, a strategy to enable farmers to improve their income, reach a living income, and reach a decent life. This strategy will be implemented in the second phase of our project, and it has three important components. Improving income from rice, both white rice and jasmine rice. Improve income from other farm sources, for example, pulses in crop rotation or bananas in intercropping. So these two focus on improving income. The third one focuses on reducing costs, reducing farm costs by improving, strengthening the cooperatives. Strengthening the cooperatives, but also strengthening again the structure of the saving and loan groups, which they used to have, but do not practice very strongly anymore. Now, there we will be providing training in good organizational management, and we will enhance particularly the leadership of the women in the cooperatives and in the saving and loan groups. Over the project period, we will be monitoring the effectiveness of this strategy. We will be monitoring whether actually farmers do improve their income, do get closer and closer to a living income benchmark and to a decent life. Now, how does all this relate to the BlocRice application? Joost?
Well, thanks, Roger. So I'd like to tell you all a bit about what we're developing. First of all, the technical architecture, and secondly, a few mock-ups we tried out in the field. So we start with what we call the data layer, the so-called open food blockchain. If you remember from my lecture before, this is that distributed database, the place where all the raw data is stored. So how does it work? Nodes or participants in the blockchain, they broadcast through the network. They store the data relevant to their own context, so the data basically that is interesting for themselves and for their network. So how does the network decide what is true? Or technically speaking, what is the consensus? Well, they basically do that on mutual trust. And this is a concept that is being developed at Delft University with the Trust Chain Research Project. So obviously this is a little bit of a technical simplification, but this is the way how the data is stored. So when you have this nice layer where we store and share this data, What do we do with this? Well, we build apps on top of it. So, a few examples. Of course, we're talking about the farmer. There it is. The farmer gets its own app, targeted to their needs with a very simple user interface. Of course, in the Khmer language. It allows the farmer to trade rice and register their transactions, but also to keep a field book, for example, to compare yields, and to record the types of trainings and interventions that they have accomplished. Another example of an app for the chain actors. To again register your rice transactions, but also to do forecasts based on the cooperatives you work with, and to manage aspects like certification, product safety, etc. In the end, the product of course ends up with the consumer. So they get a tailored web app as well. Yesterday at WWDC, Apple announced App Clips, and that is actually a concept that fits seamlessly with this concept. So we will start, of course, with an application that focuses on rice, but the main idea is that the app can be branded by the retailer or producer using a simple theming system. Then, as a final example, on top of this layer is the Blockchain Explorer. This is the tool for who really wants to know what is going on. You use this to take a deep dive into data, and it allows you to independently verify that the data and claims you're looking at are trustworthy. So NGOs and picky consumers are going to love it. So to develop all these apps straight on top of a raw blockchain is really hard, and also makes it difficult to create a new app. So that's why in between these apps and this data layer, we have what is called a so-called supply chain builder. These are the building blocks that give meaning to the raw data that is stored in the data layer. It allows you to model your supply chain, not just rice supplies, but your supply chain without programming. So this maybe is a little bit abstract and technical, so I hope you're still with me. Instead, let's make it concrete and look at a few mock-ups we've made. First of all, the consumer app. You're sitting at the breakfast table and you scan your rice cakes. It then shows you the product, there we go, including a number of claims. If you scroll down, you see the farmer which grew the rice that you're eating. If you want to know more, you can dive deeper and see the journey that your rice made, all the way from Cambodia to Veenendaal. So all the transactions from the farmer, the batch that got sent and sold to the cooperative, to the processor, and all the way in the end to Veenendaal. So next up, a mock-up of a farmer application. When you look at this application, the farmer or cooperative, they can of course register themselves, enter their basic details, and there we go. On the home screen, the farmer can start their first transaction, choose their buyer from a favorite or scanning a QR code, and then scan and weigh their first bag of rice. All the bags are there then added, and the transaction is completed. On the buyer side, they also validate this transaction with a digital handshake, and the journey of the rice then continues. So I hope this gives you a little bit of an idea what we are developing in the second phase of BlocRice. And I'm really curious to hear from you in the chat on the right. Tijmen, back to you.
Thank you. Really great to see the BlocRice application coming to life. So this really concludes our formal part, the presentations, but of course we're now on to the Q&A session, and of course open to looking at your questions. So Rogier, maybe you can join us as well for the Q&A session.
All right, so I will actually be taking the questions from the chat. And so a first question we got from J.C. de Wolf to Tijmen, and it's basically what are the key elements that need to be present to make a blockchain work in a food commodity?
Really good question, and I think all three of us should probably respond to it, because I mean there's different ways of approaching that question. For me, looking at it from an international commodity point of view, the human element is essential. So in other words, all parts of the chain need to be willing to collaborate together to solve a certain dilemma or make a sales transaction, if you will, that digital handshake. So for me, supply chain partners coming together, being willing to work together is essential. But maybe Joost, from a technical point of view, you also have a different response to that.
Yeah, well, if you look at it from a technical perspective, then the most important thing is actually, what is the kind of data that you're registering? So what is the blueprint of the value chain? And what are the points of data that you're actually verifying between the different actors? Because the data, if you self-report something, then it's less valuable than if there's a handshake between two actors. Most of all, you also have to take a look at, of course, what kind of data is actually easy to register or is already being registered, because you don't want to start up a lot of extra paperwork. But I would actually say it starts with taking a look at, what does the value chain look like? What do the different actors want to get out of this value chain using blockchain? And then start to identify the data that you're going to develop. Roger, is there something that you want to add to this? Because then I will look meanwhile to a different question.
I always want to add something. I read also in the question, do I always need to use blockchain? And I think that's a very valid question. You do not always use blockchain. Use it when you really use it, need to use it. I mean, we all know that it's become quite a hype, it's on its way down, but please do ask yourself, do I really need it, or can I solve my issue with other technologies or other instruments? But what is important for us at Oxfam, we are in this project in our work stream of beyond certification, so to say. With the systems of social compliance that we have these days, we depend on third parties. Well, it's not just third parties, there are many third parties. It's accreditors, auditors, certifiers, and so many. And we all believe in the paperwork in between, whereas what we saw in our pilot, what we did in our pilot, we gave voice to rice farmers. They directly delivered data. They answered questions about their way of life, about their production, about their yields, about their rice. And that data was being collected straight away to the rest of the partners without people being able to interfere with it. And that was a great value to us.
Okay, Roger, actually I have a kind of a follow-up question on this from Jorrit Kamminga, because he actually says, well, I immediately see the benefits in terms of transparency, showing the whole chain, but how exactly does this project improve income? Roger.
Yeah, it doesn't directly improve income as such, but it gives, this project has two main components, so to say. One component trying to improve income or enable farmers to improve their income. And then the second component is following that, monitoring that directly with blockchain technology. So of course, the technology itself doesn't improve anyone's income straight away, but it does give a certain pressure. I'll give you an example. What we saw in the pilot, at a point of time, there can be at the dashboard of an importer 9 containers of rice lined up, and 7 of them, it's all green, it's fine, all data are positive. But 2 of them, there are some question marks, and perhaps one of them, there's even data saying that, well, some violations or whatever. That importer doesn't want to have that container of rice. If that container of rice ends up in its factory and gets produced into rice crackers and there's a code on it and people can see, these farmers were not paid correctly, not in time or something. He doesn't want that, right? Or she doesn't want that. So there's a certain pressure, even through the technology, sheerly through the technology, there can be a pressure on the partners within the supply chain to fulfill all the criteria set.
Okay, I hope that's clear. A question from Arjan Kalter to Tijmen. Are currently certification bodies, organic fair trade, involved in the project? Do they see a benefit there as well? Cost reduction, better control, etc.
It's a really good question. Thanks again. Yes, in the sense that actually these farmers, and we're currently working with 50, scaling up to 500 and then beyond, are actually organic certified. So that is a minimum requirement within the project, and we're building, as Rogier mentioned, on top of that. In other words, what can we do beyond organic certification in terms of training farmers and making sure they have a more resilient livelihoods? So that's definitely in scope, and we're actually using the same data collection in the farm field books from organic certification to develop the application and fill the application, because that allows farmers to know, okay, if that's my cost for input, for example, and this is my farm gate price, what I'm left with is the profit or not for me as a farmer. And that is essential. That is empowering farmers in the supply chain, and that's precisely what we want.
All right, very good. There's actually a little bit of follow-up question. You already gave a little bit of a peek of that. Mark Koppian asks, what is the current status of the Rice blockchain? Is it being used, and by how many farmers, etc.?
Yeah. So as indicated, we ran the pilot with 50 farmers. That's one AC, and we're now scaling up to 2 additional ACs, bringing it up to 500 farmers in total.
And ACs are agricultural cooperatives, not AGCOs.
Yeah. Then actually there are a few questions for me, and some of them are really technical. One of them from Jessica Schulte, how do you account for potential semantic discrepancies in data, example currencies? I would have to go a little bit deeper with you, but what do you exactly mean with that? Because there are, one thing we noticed, for example, during the pilot, which was very interesting, was if you record data in English versus Khmer, how do you actually validate that the farmer knew that what the data point is in English versus Khmer, because they can't speak English. I would ask for this one to go to a follow-up. But Floris asks, so how is the bag of rice identified? And that's an interesting one. So what we are hoping to do in this pilot, or what right now the aim is that actually the bags of rice are being supplied to the farmers by AMRU, including a QR code. So we've identified the cost of that, and that way you can actually automate a lot of the paperwork that currently also exists. So you enhance of course the traceability. You can actually see which bags end up in which batch, but also you can take away a lot of manual paperwork and calculation mistakes that we saw during the pilot. And I would also actually very quickly go to the question of Sergey about the more tech details. So it's using a public blockchain. So it's an open blockchain based on trust chain. It's not private because at least I think we believe in an open blockchain, because then you actually get the benefits from it for the farmers. But at the end of this meeting, please send me a follow-up email and we talk a little bit more about the deep technology. Oops, the chat is jumping a little bit. There is an interesting question. It's all about the money. For Tijmen from JGH Vermeulen, how much has this BlocRice blockchain development costed in euros so far?
Well, actually, it's still, because we conducted a pilot with Oxfam, supported by the Oxfam Innovation Fund, which was approximately 50,000 euros in terms of development, and we're now doing the field research, which is also not as expensive, and we're actually about to enter into the development phase, so that fund has not been allocated yet.
Okay. Right now we are actually at 4:30 and we are through all the questions in the chat. So unless there is a final one, I would say, Tijmen, I would give the floor to you for a final closing remark.
Great, thank you, Joost, and thanks again for joining us on this informative session. Of course, you're always willing to look back at some of the things said, for example, the living wage benchmark calculation by Roger, or have the stories told by Joost. There will be a direct link on our website to follow up on. But most importantly for us all, my call to action is join us in making international agricultural supply chains more sustainable using blockchain technology. And from our side, we'll keep you informed on the outcomes of the BlocRice project. Just check our Schuttelaar and Partners website regularly. And thanks for tuning in, and looking forward to seeing you again.